When the government gives someone permission to use your land or natural resources, which may require you to leave your land, they must discuss options to avoid and minimize the negative impacts. They must give you information prior to decisions being made and give you and your community an opportunity to discuss and agree on the options. If impacts are unavoidable, then you have the right to a fair compensation to cover your losses. When you are moved to a new home or location, this is called resettlement. Governments often give this kind of permission for projects, such as a dam, power plant, transmission lines, or other large projects. Such projects can have very high risks for social and environmental impacts. These impacts can be avoided, and wherever possible, the developer should aim to avoid resettlement. When a project like this happens, there are three main groups involved. There is your government that approved the project and plays an important role in resettlement and holding developers accountable. The project developers that are running the project, they can be part of the government, engineering and construction companies, banks, or financiers. Then there are the affected people. This could be people like you, your community, and surrounding communities who will be directly or indirectly affected by the project. To protect affected people, project developers and the government need to ensure there is a strong involvement of any affected communities. This includes women, young people, indigenous people, ethnic minorities, and people with disabilities. Everyone must be involved in this process. When everyone is involved, there is a better chance for fair compensation and resolution of disputes. This also means that all of the information presented to affected communities must be understandable. Project developers must provide material orally in local languages and written in plain common language, and allow enough time for communities to absorb this information. Affected communities must tell the project developers what language their community speaks. People facing resettlement or eviction must try to find a lawyer or organization to help them through this process. These are important negotiations with powerful people. Lawyers or others can help you hold them accountable for what they are doing, good or bad. Project developers must provide a way for affected communities to communicate their problems. They must listen to the affected community's questions and concerns, and they must try to find a solution together. This process of problem solving should be well documented. Project developers must provide transportation for affected communities to attend meetings. Project developers must allow affected communities to be a part of the decision process. They must host focus groups or discussions and interviews with community and their representatives, and facilitate discussions with women-only groups. If an important decision must be made, the community representative must communicate with all the affected communities they represent. The project developers must give the affected communities enough time to go through community processes before making a decision. The project developer and the community must agree on a dispute resolution mechanism right from the beginning. This mechanism will let the community file complaints about the project. Everyone should agree beforehand on how soon complaints are addressed after being filed. Project developers and affected communities must work together as soon as the project developers know the project will be built. This stage presents an opportunity to change the design or location of a project to minimize impacts. This way, the company or developer can avoid huge costs. Resettlement should be the last resort for the project developer to take after exploring all other possible options. If resettlement is unavoidable, project developers and/or the government have to provide compensation and protection to affected communities. If people are forced to leave their land against their will and without any compensation, legal or other protections, this is called forced eviction, not resettlement. Forced eviction is a violation of international law. If people agree to move, developers and affected communities must develop a compensation and resettlement action plan. The Resettlement Action Plan explains the steps that will occur to properly resettle and compensate all affected families. It is a public document that must be translated into the national language, and everyone must be able to see. Next, the project developer will negotiate a resettlement and compensation agreement with each household. Negotiations for every family must be done using the compensation values in the Resettlement Action Plan. This helps ensure that all families are fairly compensated. Compensation is reimbursement to an affected community for what they have lost because of the project. There are two types of compensation: in-kind or cash. In-kind compensation is where project developers will build new homes and communities for affected families, as well as provide communities access to natural resources such as water, forests, and other land. They will build the schools, hospital, churches, market, and anything else lost in the move. The most important element for in-kind compensation is land for land. Cash compensation is getting the monetary value for what has been lost. This is money for the houses, buildings, land, gardens, fruit trees, and fish ponds that are lost. It is also for lost livelihoods such as farming, hunting, craft making, pottery, and any other activities that generate income. For families who have always lived from the land, cash compensation usually makes those families poorer, not wealthier, because government replacement values are generally lower than market values. Usually, the cash awarded will not be enough to rebuild, as the prices for land and materials go up around the project. However, cash compensation is necessary to cover loss of income, crops, and food. But it is not enough to restore livelihoods. Communities should always request vocational trainings in addition to cash compensation. Affected communities should ensure that the cash they receive for the lost asset is equal to the market value. Communities may also negotiate for rights to ongoing use of the resources, such as fishing in the reservoir, collection of non-timber products, or benefits such as electricity that may be generated from the project. Even if affected people do not have formal land titles, they must still be compensated for being displaced. In the new resettlement communities, these people must be given land titles and asset titles, which include recognition of male and female heads of the household equally on title. Resettlement must be completed, and compensation must be agreed upon before construction begins. During construction, the project developers will monitor and evaluate the project's impacts using agreed milestones. Project milestones are agreed on legal documents signed during compensation negotiations and used to track outcomes against promises with the project developer, the banks, and the government. Affected communities must be updated and informed of all progress. If your community is not getting a fair and just treatment, you have options to get fair compensation by using the complaint mechanism established for the project. It is good business practice to solve issues at the project level and for developers and the community to maintain good relations. When issues are not solved, then justice can be sought from the courts with the help of a lawyer or NGO partner. By following these procedures, your community can get a better compensation package for what you have lost during a project like this. Remember, you have rights during this process.